Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya. Jaya Vishnu Bhagavan Swavaraj Acharya Sadasiti Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Namachar Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Namsagaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sri Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopidas Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Ganga Shabona Tulasi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Samavetta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Go Premanandi, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadane Nirvishesha Shudyavadi Pasha Chadesha Tarane Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Gaur Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 16, Verse 4. Nijagrahau jasa viraha Kalim digvijaye kvachit Nripa linga dharam sudram Ganantam ago mitunam pada. Nijagraha, sufficiently punished. Ojasa, by prowess. Viraha, valiant hero. Kalim, unto Kali, the master of the age. Digvijaye, on his way to conquer the world. Kvachit, once upon a time. Nripalinga Dharam, one who passes in the dress of a king. Shudram, lower class. Ganantam, hurting. Gomitunam, a cow and bull. Para, on the leg. Translation: once, when Maharaj Parikshit was on his way to conquer the world, he saw the master of Kali Yuga, who was lower than a Sudra, disguised as a king and hurting the legs of a cow and bull. The king at once caught hold of him to deal sufficient punishment. Purport: the purpose of a king's going out to conquer the world is not for self-aggrandizement. Maharaj Parikshit went out to conquer the world after his ascendance to the throne, but this was not for the purpose of aggression on other states. He was the emperor of the world, and all small states were already under his regime. His purpose in going out was to see how things were going on in terms of the godly state. The king, being the representative of the Lord, has to execute the will of the Lord dually. There is no question of self-aggrandizement. Thus, as soon as Maharaj Parikshit saw that a lower class man in the dress of a king was hurting the legs of a cow and a bull, at once he arrested and punished him. The king cannot tolerate insults to the most important animal, the cow, nor can he tolerate disrespect for the most important man, the Brahmana. Human civilization means to advance the cause of a Brahminical culture and to maintain it. Cow protection is essential. There is a miracle in milk, for it contains all the necessary vitamins to sustain human physiological conditions for higher achievements. Brahminical culture can advance only when man is educated to develop the quality of goodness. And for this there is a prime necessity of food prepared with milk, fruits, and grains. Maharaj Parikshit was astonished to see that a black Shudra dressed like a ruler was mistreating a cow, the most important animal in human society. The age of Kali means mismanagement and quarrel, and the root cause of all mismanagement and quarrel is that worthless men with the modes of lower class men who have no higher ambition in life come to the helm of the state management. Such men at the post of a king are sure to first hurt the cows and the Brahminical culture, whereby pushing all society towards hell. Maharaj Parikshit, trained as he was, got the scent of this root cause of all quarrel in the world. Thus, he wanted to stop it in the very beginning. Translation: once when Maharaj Parikshit was on his way to conquer the world, he saw the master of Kali Yuga, who was lower than a Shudra, disguised as a king and hurting the legs of a cow and bull. The king at once caught hold of him to deal sufficient punishment. Here begins the story of Maharaj Parikshit's endeavors to stop the influence of Kali Yuga in his kingdom. We know, of course, that after Krishna disappeared and the Pandavas disappeared, the particular age was approaching. That was Kali Yuga, which began about 5,000 years ago. So this is also an arrangement of the Supreme Lord. The yugas flow in time from one to the other, and sooner or later we end up with a Kali Yuga every 4 million years or so. So it inevitably happens. So in that case, we cannot expect very good government, and the people in general are very sinful. So it's we say inevitable that at certain times in human history we'll get low points where the mode of ignorance is strong. Nevertheless, it's the duty of the king to counteract that as much as he can. And therefore Parikshit is portrayed here as the king who was ready to combat the influence of Kali Yuga. So here he is called Vira, which means a brave person or heroic person. This is a characteristic of the Kshatriya. The Kshatriya is not afraid to fight. In fact, he enjoys fighting. So that's not the nature of everyone. Brahmins, for instance, don't like to fight. Or Vaishyas don't like to fight. Sudras are incapable of fighting. Really. So it's the Kshatriya that likes to fight. So that is one quality of a Kshatriya which makes him suitable for managing. And therefore the king has to have this quality of being able to suppress opposition. However, as Prabhupada points out in the purport, that Parikshit was not interested simply in suppressing everybody so that he could control. He was not interested in simply having a big kingdom, or as he calls it here, aggrandizement, to just make a bigger and bigger kingdom. We often see that as the ambition of someone. So we see in ancient times Romans try to expand their empire everywhere. Genghis Khan tried to expand his empire everywhere. Or then we have Germany trying to expand its empire, or Japan trying to expand its empire, or Britain trying to expand its empire and control everything. So it's not uncommon that people in the material world try to do this. They try to control more and more. You see the tendency popping up all the time. But the ideal king doesn't do that. It's not his ambition to simply control for control's sake. Of course, you know that the Manus are empowered by the Lord to enforce good government on everybody, as far as earth is concerned. So their ambition is simply to see that Dharma is enacted everywhere, and that people are following it. So Maharaj Parikshit inherited the kingdom of Yudhisthira, and therefore he was simply carrying out his function of making sure that Dharma remained intact in his kingdom. And it says here he was a Digvijay, going out to, it literally means conquering the directions, which means that ultimately you have to control everybody. There can be no dissident elements anywhere in your kingdom. So in that sense he's an autocrat. So that is his duty, to see that everybody is in, obeying properly. But we see in this particular case that it is not simply obedience for its own sake, it's obedience to the principles of Dharma. So the king has to know what Dharma is. He has to know what is right and wrong. And how does he know that? Because he has scriptural knowledge. He has to study. So, of course, the other idea is that the king has to, by his qualities, have an interest in maintaining Dharma. Not that he simply consults a book, but he must have an interest for it. So vira, of course, means, in one sense, yudhavira, the one who is courageous in battle. He does not turn his back when there is a challenge. So that's a king. Yeah. If there's some challenge to his authority, he is not willing to fight for the right cause. But as I said, the king must also have a sense of what is right, what is dharma. So there is another type of vira, that's dharma vira, one who is very enthusiastic to enforce dharma. In rasas, we have the vira rasa. The Sthai bhava is called utsaha, enthusiasm. But then it has different types of enthusiasm to fight. So that becomes this rasa of the warrior. Or Nrsimhadev, when he wants to tear apart Hiranyakasipu, then his vira rasa, he fights with them and he tears them apart. But there's another type of enthusiasm to enforce dharma, or to act according to dharma, or to display dharma. So that a king should also have, not just fighting. He has to try to enforce the laws of dharma in the kingdom, which means he has to know them very well. He has to have enthusiasm to follow the principle of dharma. An ideal person is, or an ideal example of that is Yudhisthira, who was the son of Dharma, son of Yamaraj. So he was very conversant with Dharma, and he was always very cautious to rules kingdom according to principles of Dharma. Another person of that nature is Ramchandra. He is considered to be an ideal king because he's very conscious of implementing the rules properly, and it always be a fair judgment of everything in his kingdom. So there's a dharma vira. Parikshit was qualified with both. Fortunately, he came in the line from the Pandavas, so he had very great knowledge of dharma, and he also had very great respect for the brahmanas. Prabhupada mentions in the purport how the brahmana has to be respected. This is particularly true in the case of the king. Now, because the king is supreme in power, there is a tendency to not follow anybody's advice, because he's supreme. But in the system of varnashram, the kshatriya, though he has power, supreme power in one sense, he is not supreme. The brahmanas are supreme, the ones who don't like to fight, because they're cowards in battle. But they have knowledge, spiritual knowledge, so they're the ones who are supreme. And the king has to respect them and follow their advice. So that's the safeguard for the king, that he doesn't become too ambitious and fall into materialistic tendencies and exploit the citizens, etc. We have the spiritual head of the society which the king must respect. So very fortunately, the descendants of Manu all have this quality. They're all qualified persons and they stay in proper line. So this also guarantees that the king is not interested in aggrandizement. The brahmanas will always counsel the king. They'll advise him so that he's not becoming too proud, egotistical, or possessive, etc., and give him good counsel on how to rule his kingdom. So, therefore, the ideal kshatriya has to be obedient to the brahmanas, and therefore the brahmanas are respected. So, of course, not only by the kshatriyas, the brahmana has to be respected by the other castes as well, the sudras and the vaishyas. So, therefore, the brahmana gets the most respect within the society in an ideal state. Apart from that, of course, the respect has to be given to all living entities. Though we have grades of respect, the injunction is that all living entities have to be respected. And therefore we see when the king was inspecting his kingdom, he looked at this Kali, and he was attacking a cow and a bull. They weren't humans, but they were animals, but they were part of his kingdom. So he had compassion for them. And he interrupted this personification of Kali because of his cruel act. So, therefore, the king has to have compassion for all living entities. Of course, he gives respect to the Brahmana most, but he has to respect all the other living entities within the kingdom. So this is the principle of Dharma. All living entities have to be respected. Mahimsa sarvabhutani. Don't commit violence against any living entity. And this is often quoted by acharyas, not even, of course, Vaishnava acharyas. Shankaracharya, I think, also quotes it someplace as well. You have to have non-violence against all living entities. So it's a principle of Dharma itself, not only for the Kshatriya, but for all members of society. And thus the king is responsible for minimizing the violence within society. And therefore, there are laws. Even in a normal modern society, laws are there basically to avoid unnecessary violence. So if people cheat and lie and steal and murder or whatever, then they catch them and throw them in jail. So that's the purpose of a government, to minimize the violence in society. However, modern societies don't see the extent of violence. They maybe see some violence against other human beings. Even in previous ages, it's only against some human beings, not all human beings. So your own country, okay, we'll protect you, but we're not going to, it doesn't matter what violence you do against some other people of another country or another race. So we get slavery and things like that happening. The laws of violence and non-violence are rather narrow-minded for many people. But the Vedic literature has a very broad standard. It's not just human beings, it's not just some types of human beings, but all living entities, including the plants. You don't unnecessarily cause violence against anything that's living on earth. And of course, we're going to extend it beyond that, even non-living entities, so we don't like to destroy them. Okay? So we try to minimize violence within this world. A very, very broad principle. But we cannot understand that if we don't have proper knowledge. So yes, I'll protect my family, that's the first thing. I'll protect myself, I'll protect my family, maybe that's as far as some people go. Then others go beyond, okay, let's protect everybody within the city or the village or whatever like that. And they get a little bit bigger, and then it's a country. And then maybe it's all human beings. Okay, we'll save all the human beings, but don't worry about the animals. Everybody has limitation. So, the Vedic literature tells us, no, you have to extend that compassion everywhere, to everything around us in this world. But we can't understand that with our limited mind. So that's what we need the guidance of Scripture to tell us what are the proper rules of Dharma. Not some prejudice restricted vision. So the king is responsible for enforcing that type of principle on society. This is Dharma, not Vaishnava Dharma, but it's regular Dharma. But we find that in Vaishnava Dharma, we also have the same principle. And therefore we see in the Nectar of Devotion, for instance, we have many different rules and regulations of bhakti, in the 64 actually. And in the first 10 we have 1, give respect to the aspata tree. And so give respect to the plants, and give respect to the animals, as well as human beings. And then I think the 17th one is the do not things, and the first angas of bhakti is don't disturb any living entity. Any prani, that's anything that's got life. You don't disturb them. So we get the negative and positive. Give respect and don't disturb. And these are the door to bhakti. They're not even bhakti itself. They're the door, the principles we have to follow in order to practice bhakti. That is hearing, chanting, remembering. We have to follow these principles also. Okay? So therefore, inbuilt within bhakti also we have some dharmic principles, well, what are common with the regular dharma. We have these principles also within devotional service. If we think about it, then it is natural that a devotee should show compassion for all life, because everything is a jiva, and every jiva is a servant of the Supreme Lord. So we don't worry so much about the body. We understand there's a jiva who's a servant of the Supreme Lord somewhere in that body. And therefore, in that sense, we have to respect. The respect that we show as a Vaishnava may be a little bit different from the respect that is given in normal society. It may appear to be different. But ultimately, it is, we can say, respect given with a broader vision. So in human society, generally respect for life means humanitarian work. So we open hospitals and things like that. And then we see, on the other hand, Prabhupada often criticizes religious movements that open hospitals and schools as being not doing their duty properly. They're not concentrating on spiritual things. They're involved in material charities. And so that is so. Helping the bodies of living entities from their suffering is material charity. It's a show of compassion on the material level, and it's a material punya to do so. So in the Dharma scriptures, we have all sorts of punyas you can do, a big list of nice activities you can do, which will give you nice credits in future lifetimes and counteract your sinful habits. So these are things like giving education, giving food, giving water, planting trees, etc. All sorts of activities to help the human society or the world in general. These are all called punyas. So these are all recognized as material punyas in the world. So these are beneficial for society, beneficial for one's own purification, to get one to a higher level of gunas, from Rajagun to Sattvagun, let's say. In that sense, good. From the devotional point of view, of course, we're not so much interested in the gunas. We're interested in cultivating devotion, bhakti, a relationship with Krishna. So if we get too involved with this, with the material aspects of showing compassion to living entities by doing material punyas, we get distracted from our process of cultivating bhakti. But, as I said, we also have in bhakti itself compassion. Respect all living entities, don't harm them. How do we do that? At the same time, we're trying to concentrate on bhakti. We're not involved in opening hospitals and educational institutes, etc. It looks a little bit contrary. Okay? So the solution to that is that our compassion is, we can give that do that activity also, but that cannot be our main activity. So our main activity also involves compassion, and that is spreading the spiritual message to people as an ultimate solution to their suffering in this material world. This is the final way in which they can get rid of all their karma and everything else and give them the highest happiness. So ultimately, compassion means to give the most happiness to another living entity. But we know that the highest happiness is not material happiness. It's another illusion. So the real highest happiness is spiritual happiness. And the highest spiritual happiness is prema. Right? So we have to educate the populace of spiritual life, bhakti and prema, instead of staying in the material world. So that is our major thrust in showing compassion to all living entities. We try to do that as the main activity. But it does not mean that we are also indifferent to the material suffering of living entities. But we see that the ultimate solution is that they have to accept the Lord and worship the Supreme Lord. That's the principle for getting rid of the suffering. Therefore, we should not think that the Vaishnava is indifferent to the suffering of humanity. Very, very compassionate person. It is said that Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was very, we could say, sensitive to the suffering of living entities. If he saw a person suffering on the street or something, or getting attacked by another person, then he felt great pain. Even if he saw an animal, in India we see how the animals, like the donkeys, to get loaded up with loads, and then the guy's hitting the donkey to make a move, then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati would feel great pain in his heart for all of that. Or when they had an epidemic in Bengal, that area, then he could not tolerate to see all these people dying and suffering and dying, because they couldn't prevent the plague or whatever it was, the epidemic from spreading. So he definitely had a compassion for everybody. At the same time, we see that ultimately how he tried to solve the problem was he started a whole movement, a spiritual movement, to solve the suffering of humanity. So that is how the Vaishnava expresses his compassion for all living entities. It is inherent in bhakti, but then we, as much as possible, try to spread the message of bhakti to everyone in this world. So Parikshit was a king, and he operated on both levels, the regular Dharma level, enforcing all the rules of Dharma. But he was also a great devotee of the Supreme Lord. So he had that principle behind him also in his operation of the kingdom. So he was doing both things. And ultimately we see that though his duty was to enforce all the laws of the kingdom by the arrangement of the Supreme Lord, he had to renounce all of that because he was going to die in 7 days. And then he simply dedicated himself to hearing Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami. So that was his highest interest. But as a king, he had to enforce the Dharma, and part of that was to see that no living entity within his kingdom was unduly suffering. Suffering is natural to the material world because everybody has a body, and as the Bhagavatam says, one living entity feeds off another living entity. We can only exist if we take the life of another living entity. So then what to do? There is automatic violence in this world for everybody. So for the lower species of life, there is no concept of sin and karma. But when we have a human being, then we have the reaction, we get karmic reaction for all of our activities. And so the activities which are going to give us bad karma, those are called sins. And those that give us good results we call punyas. So the sins are the violent activities that disturb other living entities unnecessarily. As I said, to live we do have to commit some violence, so we have to kill a plant or step on a bug or whatever, so we can't avoid that. So all we can do is minimize the sin, and then it's considered, okay, it's tolerable. So therefore, we minimize our violence in this world. So therefore, instead of killing animals, we take the plant life instead of the animal life. If you have to take the animal life, you take the lower life rather than the higher life of the animal. So we have grades of, more serious sin, so to speak. But still, it's sin. Even if we kill a plant, it's also sin. And we do have to eat something. We have to kill a plant eventually. It's also sin. But it's less. So in normal Dharma, of course, they give you the major sins. Okay, avoid this, avoid this, avoid this, and then you function within society. But still, there's all these other little sins we're doing all the time. So they make arrangement for that, how to avoid all these little sins and accidental sins and stepping on bugs, etc. So then they have a whole system for that called Panchamahayagya. Every day, a grihasta has to do this ceremony to counteract his everyday sins, accidental sins like lighting a fire and killing a bug when the fire lights, or rolling the chapatis and an insect gets squished or something like this. So all these accidental things, they have what is called Panchamahayagya. So you have to worship the Pitras and recite the Vedas, worship the Devatas and Supreme Lord, welcome guests into your house, offer some food to the animals. So these are the daily rituals you have to do every day to counteract your accidental sins. So there are prescriptions there. As far as Vaishnava is concerned, then we have another principle, that is we offer everything to the Supreme Lord. All the food. That becomes prasadam. And we're not only freed from sin by that, but it also produces bhakti. So it's a very powerful means of advancing a devotional service, is taking prasadam. We avoid the sins, and we also get bhakti by the offering food and taking that food. So therefore we do have arrangements in this world, even though ultimately we have to commit violence. We do have arrangements so that we can get out all of that, and we can actually advance in devotional service. But to understand this, we need knowledge. If we don't have the knowledge, then we go on in ignorance, and we are bound to make a lot of mistakes and commit a lot of sinful activities, and therefore we have to suffer in this world. So we do need proper knowledge for all of this. So that is why we have Scripture to put us on the right path and give us the right principles to follow. Okay, any question?
So, for a successful Varnashram system, everybody needs to know their place and fulfill their duties properly, but perhaps most importantly, are qualified kings acting under the advice of qualified brahmanas. So, is this system really practical for Kali Yuga?
Okay. Well, that's the problem, because we don't have the empowered representative of Manu doing it at the present time. Then it's quite difficult to do it, so we cannot have a perfect system as such. So all we can do is, one, surrender to the Supreme Lord and chant the holy name. That's the saving grace in Kali Yuga. The other is we can take parts of that system and try to implement it as far as possible. In other words, the rules of Dharma are there. What is sin, what is not sin, we can understand what the principles are. So to some degree we have to try to follow those principles as much as we can.
As I understand, historically democracy more or less came in because people didn't trust the leaders.
Yeah, they're unqualified leaders, as Prabhupada says here. He says that they're fake leaders.
Of course, democracy isn't perfect, but when you have somebody in absolute power, the tendency is to become corrupt.
Yeah. Well, the problem was also that these people who were in the power, they didn't have the higher authority of a council of sattvic brahmanas to help them. So that's why they go out of control. So the ideal king does have to have submissiveness also within he's not just a fool, a Sudra fool, and he's not just a tyrant showing off his prowess.
You mentioned that Srila Prabhupada spoke very best. Oftentimes in person was starting schools and coming down to the material platform to speak material welfare. But at the same time, we see he did desire us to start schools or even up to colleges, universities, Varnashram college type things. So I'm wondering what the difference would be, and also also we see that we have a hospital we have hospital,
Yeah.
hospitals in
Yeah.
India,
Yeah.
and I think those are very valuable.
Yeah.
It is valuable for us
Yeah.
to also
Yeah.
have this way to go, these
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah.
So how do we...
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, the idea is that if we get preoccupied and our main activity is opening hospitals and starting schools, which are very materialistic in their whole setup, whatever, then that's not considered proper. If we can make it spiritual, then of course very good. So we have a hospital that they're all chanting Hare Krishna, they're hearing Bhagavad Gita every day. What's the problem? So we're doing both things. We're helping them materially and spiritually. Of course, we're not simply trying to make everybody into doctors, but if people are naturally doctors anyway, then let them be devotee doctors, and then help people by, giving them spiritual solution as well as cure their material body. So that's a good balance there. The same with schools. We can give them education, but we also understand that a lot of this material education is not so good for their spiritual development. So along with that, then we have to help spiritual education as well. So we're trying to establish a university. Primarily, we're trying to establish a university where we study the works of the acharyas, not the material literature. Along with that, we can also do that, but there should be more emphasis upon the spiritual aspect of things. And even if they do study the material subjects, we also indicate to them that we can't separate that material knowledge from the higher spiritual knowledge. If we do, then it becomes demonic. So we have that idea, then no problem. Material society has to go on. And to do that, you need expertise in the material fields necessary, but that's not everything. It's not 100%. And so the perfect person will have knowledge in both fields and be able to apply that material knowledge properly. We also have things like Ayurveda. Okay, so that's medical science, material, because it's dealing with the material body. But then we also we find that within the texts and whatever, in the beginning of their texts, they'll have a prayer to Vishnu. So they understand that the medicine, all this is working under the guidance of the Supreme Lord ultimately. So they don't separate. I think that material medicine is something that we control, and we can somehow we have control over life by using medicines or giving operations, etc. And you understand there's Supreme Lord's will is also involved in the whole system.
Obviously acting in kindness and non-violence is most conducive to promote goodness. But we see places in the Shastras, for example, like that condone killing a snake if you need to, or if someone's going against the Vaishnavas, be prepared to kind of battle against that person. So obviously there's a principle of non-violence in a sense, and could you speak about proper times to act?
Well, this comes up also in the Bhagavad Gita in the 2nd chapter, where Arjuna doesn't want to fight. and then in the commentaries they discuss non-violence is there as a principle, but there are certain instances where you can use violence also. So then I think it quotes from one of the Smritis there, that in the case that you're attacked, if your house is set on fire, if someone comes and steals your family members and your wife and your children away, you have a right to be violent. So it's not that violence is non-violence is absolute. You can't do anything at any time. According to the circumstance, you may have to. You may be forced to defend yourself or whatever. So therefore, it's not absolute non-violence. There are exceptional cases, and those are also covered within the Smriti Shastras itself.
One that I really struggle with is killing an animal.
Yeah.
It might be a dangerous animal.
Yeah.
For instance, we have snakes around here, and we get told to
kill the snakes.
You have to, but there's a little bit of
you don't. You're compassionate to the snake. Well, that's also like with scorpions, the same thing, and maybe any poisonous thing, because children walking around and they get bit by a snake or stung by a scorpion, not very good. So it's a precautionary measure. So to a certain degree, I suppose we can do that. With or mosquitoes, for instance. Let's not kill the mosquitoes because they're living entities, but if they bite you get malaria or whatever like that, so not good either. So then we have to take prevention and put screen windows up Because you're being violent, you're not allowing the mosquito to use its free will and come into the room, but we have to protect ourselves also to a certain degree. So just like you protect yourself from the aggressors, so you have to protect yourself from these other animals also who may bite you.
So what's the, in terms of incurring sin?
Of course, the other thing, if you want to do the snakes, you can take the snake and catch him and put him out somewhere else, but then he may bite somebody else in the process too.
So you not incur sin, and you can say, if I go and kill an animal because even though it might not be a direct threat, but I've convinced myself that it's a threat.
Yeah. Well, we can always misuse our judgment also, and this all the animals are threats, so I'll kill all the animals. You can say that also, whether it's a dog or a whatever. So we have to use our discretion also, and not become overcome by hatred or exploitative or false ego or whatever, just to exercise our will. The kshatriya is allowed to kill in certain circumstances. To do that, then he goes out and he hunts. So that's training for killing. So he's not afraid of killing. He doesn't hesitate to kill when he needs to kill. But then it's said that a king who's addicted to hunting, he's no longer qualified as a king. He can hunt, but he hunts only for a certain purpose. Not that he's just trying to get some pleasure out of it, but he's to train himself. But to that extent, but he can't become attached to just killing the animals and going out and shooting them and whatever. Yeah? So that's not the purpose. So if he gets attached, then he's no longer qualified as a king. He's exploiting the situation for his own, ego.
I understand that the kshatriyas would engage in this hunting, that they would also give us some kind of like ceremony afterwards with the animal. There would be a sacrifice for the animal, and there would be some process they would do to neutralize the sin.
Also, yeah, when they killed animals, some of the animals were used in sacrifices, so that also, when you say got rid of the sin, so they used some of the animals which are suitable for sacrifices also.
Yeah, you mentioned how even plants suffer, and by offering them Krishna, we get rid of that karma that we.
Yeah.
So some devotees use that argument in relation to dairy products from dairy industry, which is very obviously harming cows, killing baby cows, and the horror connected to the dairy industry is really obvious for everyone. And some devotees say, well, it's okay because if you do it Krishna, and then everything is good.
Mm-hmm.
Some other devotees say that we shouldn't actually touch the dairy from dairy industry because it's full of karma and torturing the cows and everything. So what's your opinion about this?
Well, as much as possible, we try to avoid it. If there's no, we can't avoid it, then maybe we have to. If you have to take the milk because you need some nourishment or whatever, the Prabhupada says there's some physiological conditions for higher achievement in the milk, and then you have no opportunity to take ahimsa milk, then what to do? So then there may be cases like that. If possible, then we take the good choice and have non-violent milk, or choose to fast from milk for some time, but then our health may get affected also, so we have to make some arrangements.
Do you think even, because some people say that the milk from the dairy industry has absolutely nothing, just full of pollutants and hormones and so many things. So are you saying that even if it's full of all these...
Well, again, we have to look inside. Even there, we have to look for the better milk, the worse milk, or the one that hasn't got the hormones in it, or whatever, if possible. Or we can just avoid it completely. In that case, if we don't need the milk or whatever, and take soy products or something instead. I don't know, or take some other vitamins instead if we have to.
You mentioned, all the chapters that animals don't suffer from karma, they other animals.
Yeah, they've been suffering from previous karmas as a human being, but they don't accrue karma. And the tiger does not accrue karma when he kills a deer. but he's got a tiger body because of his previous karma as a human being, and he became a tiger. So they're wearing off their karmas as human being, but they're not accruing karmas when they're an animal and they're killing another animal. Yeah, after their karmas are expended, then they rise up and then they become a human being, and then they do bad activities, they get down to an animal species again, and then they have to wear off all that karma again. There was an experiment that one scientist did. I don't know if it's true or not, but anyway, he was he used to he connected the plants to some sensitive device, and he could see their reactions to different things. And then he happened to I think he was doing some other, he had them attached like that, and the graph going like this for the plants. And he had in the other room he had some shrimps, some live shrimps, and he put them in hot water because it's just food or something like that. And then he went back and looked at the graph, and when the shrimps died through the hot water, then it was the plants were going like this. The plants were sensitive to the death of the shrimps. So then he understood that, even though the plants don't have senses in the normal sense, they do have a sense of violence in this world, and they could react to the violence also. So even plants react to the violence around them. What is to be the violence on themselves? Okay, Hare Krishna.